All right, so here we are for another episode of RC Pit Stop, and today we have the HPI Vorza S. Now this is a brand new car. I have not run this car yet. As you can see, it is brand spanking new. There's not a speck of dirt or dust on this. Haven't even taken it outside. So this is a kind of unique situation that I found myself in, having to do an RC Pit Stop video on this car to show you how to install some hinge pin braces, some alloy hinge pin braces that should have been included in this car. Now, I didn't mention this during the unboxing because between the time that I finished filming, uploaded the video, and got it ready to basically release, HPI contacted me and said, hey, there's actually some bits missing from these cars, and it only seems to be the first batch that was delivered to Australia. So it seems to be quite a unique situation. I don't think this is a global thing. So for those of you overseas, you may not have this problem, but essentially there are some hinge pin braces that should have come included or pre-installed on the car, and they are not. Now there's been obviously a few of these cars that have sold and gone out to regular consumers. But the good thing is that HPI have actually sent out these braces to be installed, so that the end users can actually install them. Now, some of these people may not be too familiar with these cars, and I figured, hey, it's a great opportunity to kind of do another RC pit stop and show you all how to install these braces, because the rear ones I think are going to be pretty simple. We'll get through those fairly quickly. The hard one I think is going to be the front, but that's just my guess, but we'll see. So first thing we're going to do is, of course, take out the body. Now, you'll see I've done a couple of modifications here already. I've got my magnet underneath here to hold my body pins when I'm swapping out batteries and stuff. And I've also shoe glued this back section here a little bit, just as I said I would in the unboxing video, just to give it a bit of strength so that it doesn't wreck too bad, when I'm out running the car. I've also elongated those holes a little bit too. So hopefully this will hold up a little bit. I probably could have done a bit more, but I was actually running low on shoe glue, so I didn't want to overdo it. But anyway, that body's done. And now we can move on to getting this thing fixed up. We'll cut to different angles, and I'll show you exactly what you need to do. Okay, so we're going to start on this back section here, and from what I can see, we need to remove one screw for the chassis brace here, and we need to remove these 4 screws that are underneath the diff just here. So the best way to do this is obviously start with this wheel by removing this wheel just here. We need our 17mm hex. Flip that to the right side and get this guy out of here. Boom. Makes light work of that. Put that aside. You can move that underneath. And now we have full access to this screw just here. And I'm going to use my tool, my special speedy tool here, to get rid of that if I can. There we go. There we are. He's out. Put him aside. Now we can flip the car on its side. Now, usually these tools can undo it, so here we go. Or I can move the clutch up, and there we go. And we need to be careful here because this might fall apart. Put it back onto the tyre there, and this should hopefully just pop out like so. Look at that, how easy was that? Now we have access to these hinge pin braces that we need to replace. So basically we just need to find the matching one. So this one here is the matching one for the rear, and the one for the front actually needs to slot into a little hole on the chassis, which is just there. So this one here goes on the front, and you can see, you can probably see it better if I bring it up close to the camera. You can see how it's got that that little piece that needs to slot into the hole on the chassis. So we'll go ahead and start with this one. We'll take those 2 screws out. If I can get rid of that one first. Okay, so I fitted up my brace, so you can see that it's all done up there. I've got my 2 screws on there. I've removed the hinge pins because I need to insert them in from the rear to get all this to line up properly with the new aluminium braces. I tried to do it while the pins were on there, but it was just a bit too hard. So I'm hoping that when I put the back brace in, everything kind of aligns and it works out really well. So there are a couple of small screws that you need to put here and here, which will stop these hinge pins from backing out. So I'll install those next, and we can move on to the back brace. So you can see that those screws are now installed. You'll need to also use those washers so that they cover the hole of the hinge pin, and that way it stops the hinge pin from popping out. So once you remove these huge screws that are back here holding the old plastic brace in place, you can pop these back into position, screw them back in, and then we're ready to put our hinge pins back in place. So as you can see, that's now all done and ready to be reassembled back to the chassis. Just making sure that when you do put your hinge pins back on and everything, you've got your dog bones in position, because sometimes they do fall out as you're doing this. But as you can see there, that's how those chassis braces go on. So there's a fairly quick job. It is a little fiddly, but it is fairly quick to do. Now when putting this back on, it's important that you remember to put your drive shaft back in, because that's one of the things that I've done many times, where I get so excited about putting everything back into place and I forget to insert the drive shaft. So just make sure that that's in position when you do that. I'm not going to try and do it on camera because it's a little bit awkward, but just something to keep in mind there. So everything's reassembled now. You can see I've mounted up my chassis brace just fine, and the hinge pin braces look very good there. That one keys into that hole beautifully, so that actually worked out really well. And for those of you with a keen eye as well, you might notice that I've actually put some droop screws on here. I had some really nice stainless steel ones, so I've actually popped some droop screws on here that I can adjust from the top, which work very, very nicely. Now for the front, from what I can see, it's pretty much the same as the rear, but there's just a little bit more disassembly that you need to do. So I think I can get away with it by just removing these two screws over here. So that one and that one. I'll need to take both wheels off, because I'm going to need to take these links out of the steering knuckles. So once I disassemble those two links, I should be able to get everything to come out and slide from underneath that. I'm hoping I don't have to take out this entire top plate. That's what I'm hoping for. I think I can do it with just those two, but we'll see. Let's take the wheels off first, and then we'll see how we go from there. Something to keep in mind here is that there are two more screws that need to be taken out, which are actually screwed into the plastic hinge pin brace at the back here. Weirdly enough, these are actually self-tapping screws. So just remove those two along with the 4 and the 2 on top. And let's find out live on camera if this will actually slide out as I intended. Yes, it does. Look at that. So that slides out beautifully. Now I just got to remove these two screws from here. So that one there and this one on this side. And then I can take the whole thing out and work on it safely. So there we go. You can see now by just removing all of those screws, including the ones on the steering knuckles here, the whole thing comes out very easy. I just need to basically remove these two screws that are holding this hinge pin brace in place and replace it with the alloy one, and we're pretty much ready to reassemble the entire car. So there we go, that's now been installed, and you can see here I've used the same screws to basically put it back into place. So these two are the same existing screws. They do give you the hardware here to cap the little hinge pins so they don't pop out. You don't need the washers on these ones. You can see that the screws kind of cover the little hinge pin and stop that from coming out. They do give me a couple of tiny little grub screws. They're just M3 grub screws, and I have no idea where these go. If anyone knows what those grub screws are for, please let me know in the comments, because I'm not entirely sure what they're for. But they do give you 2 new screws. You can see them, they're countersunk ones. They do give you those for you to screw onto the new alloy hinge pin, because obviously you can't use the existing ones that were there because they were self-tapping into the plastic. You can't use them there. So now it's just a matter of putting everything back together, sliding this guy back in with the dog bone back in the outdrive here, and reassembling my steering links, and we're good to go. It's as simple as that. So there we go, we are all done and ready for our first bash. I'll give you a quick glimpse of all this, all fitted up. So everything keyed in beautifully, it works perfect. These parts are obviously, you know, the HPI quality that we'd expect. There was no sanding or trimming or anything like that that needed to be done. Everything just fitted in perfectly. So I'm pretty happy with the result overall. I just don't know what those little grub screws are for. I can't figure out what they're for. But it's nice to have a couple of spare grub screws, I guess. Now, of course, as I said at the beginning of the video, this is only for Australian customers, and it's only for this batch of cars, and of course for the Vorza S. If you've got the standard Vorza or the Nitro Vorza Truggy, then I don't think that this actually applies to you, because those parts are not meant to be included. But if you've got one of these and you didn't get those alloy parts, be sure to contact your retailer, and they should get in contact with the Australian distributor, and you know, somebody should, you know, send these parts out to you free of charge, just as I received them free of charge. So really good that they're actually doing that, and hopefully the next batch of these cars will come with these things already pre-fitted. Now, just very quickly before we finish this video up, for those of you with a keen eye, you might actually notice that the car's sitting a little bit higher now than it did at the start of the video. And that's because I've just changed a couple of things on the suspension. Now, I already had my shock collars wound all the way down, but one thing that I've done many times in the past, and it's worked wonders for me, is actually modify the springs a little bit. So one of the things that tends to happen with a lot of RCs, once you have them for a while and you're running them, jumping them, doing all sorts of things, the springs can fatigue and they can start to droop. So your car starts to sag, everything kind of sits a bit lower than it normally would. And the first thing that I always get asked, you know, what springs can I swap these out with so that I can lift the car up again? Should I use the standard ones? Should I you know, go for some aftermarket ones, change the shocks out altogether? What should I do? Well, I actually find that if you just stretch your springs a little bit, you can get a bit more life out of them. So I know that some people may hate this, they may not like it, but I actually find that this actually is really helpful, and it's saved me from buying new springs quite a number of times. So whilst I was working on the car, I took the shock springs off and I just gave them a little bit of a stretch. Now I do this very slowly and I do it in stages, so I don't just yank on them and just pull them apart like Hulk. Don't do that. I just give them a little bit of a stretch and then slowly just pull a little bit harder each time until I get them, you know, roughly where I want them to be. And I'll put them back in, and as you can see now, the car has got quite a bit of clearance. The arms are sitting fairly parallel to the chassis, which is actually something that, you know, I kind of expected this setup to be done like that out of the box. And I've got scope to adjust. So if I find that it's, you know, it's sitting up a bit too high or whatever, I can actually wind the shock collars back a little bit, and, you know, I've got some adjustability, which is something that I didn't have before. So that's why the car is sitting up the way that it is. I was thinking of swapping out the springs, but I just had this thing, you know, I'll just stretch them out and just see what happens. And yeah, just gave them a little bit more length, and hey presto, the car sits up a little bit nicer. So that's it for this video, guys. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and it's helped you out in some way, be sure to hit that like button before you go. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new, and as always, check out the video description down below. I'll have more links to the Vorza S that you see here, as well as links to my social media pages if you want to stay a little bit ahead of what goes on here on YouTube. That's it from me. Thank you again, and I'll speak to you all next time.